So my first question to you, Anjali, do you think the AI will eliminate bias?
Yes. So we currently use AI in three different spaces in talent acquisition because for a professional services firm, and I'm sure that my colleagues will might agree, is that talent acquisition has three layers for us. So the first is obviously recruitment, which is kind of the obvious one that people think of when there's talent acquisition. The second is skills development and learning, because what we're having to hire quite rapidly these days is not necessarily the right skill. So the foundation skill, absolutely we need to hire, but then we need to kind of hire the right mindset because the level of technology change and the level of business change these days is phenomenal. I mean, the COVID pandemic just changed the whole way the business model works, right? Um, and the third is the automated workforce. So, being a professional outsourcing provider, we have a large automated workforce that is kind of then working concurrently with the human workforce. And I do think that the way AI is working at the moment, it is working really hard to bring a whole lot of diversity and inclusiveness into the way we are operating. So, HR does tend to be a diverse space anyway. But if you kind of think of other functional areas, so operations, IT, Manisha might agree with me, manufacturing, right? Where it tends to not be that diverse or that be that inclusive, especially from a gender perspective, we find that bringing in those three component parts starts to create a level playing field, and that is driven by AI.
It's great. Going to Christine, it's a staggering number: 77,000 full-time placements in last 1 year. That's a big number. So how do you folks see, that those hires that you do it for the global corporations whatever the platforms, tools, the process you use that or that have you seen AI eliminates the bias or any other practices have you seen it?
Yeah. Actually, the 77, it's actually more like 80, is our contractors. We made over 200,000 permanent placements.
Wow.
Globally.
Okay, that's
so
great.
Yeah, it's pretty big. And first of all, I'd say I do agree with Anjali in the way that we can use AI in our industry. You've probably seen I've worked all over the world, up in various locations, and I've always seen bias exhibited, to be honest. We all have, if we've been in this industry long enough, whether you're in a frontline sales function or whether you're in an HR function. Unfortunately, it does exist. And I would love to say that I think that AI can eliminate bias, but I don't think it can, because obviously AI tends to be built on past behavior. We've looked at this a lot. We do use AI in our business, and a bit later on I'll talk a bit more about that. But unconscious bias happens, unfortunately, everywhere. And when your AI capability is built on history, unfortunately, it doesn't quite eliminate it. It helps, but it can't eliminate it because of the way that it behaves and what it draws on. It's my opinion.
Thank you. And in Manisha, I know Schneider Electric is a great engineering firm. It's great innovation. It's a world class manufacturing engineering firm. And I mean, I'm sure you have. It's a global firm. You have a global workforce. Um, how far are you with AI implementing in the HR space, dealing with bias and and then other factors of the neutrality and focus on the skills but not on the gender and other things?
Wow, that's a very rich question, Samir. Thank you for that. Schneider is 135,000 strong people organization spread across 100 plus country. And in context of AI, that just gives you the complexity of data set and also the decision making that our HR folks have to do. So if I have to answer that question on bias, can it help eliminating bias? It can. So I know the house is divided between Christine and Anjali, and I will take a middle path. I will say it can eliminate the bias in the processes by because of two things. One is the unconscious human bias it takes away by running this entire data and applying some science of HR into that and making that decision grid and choices available to our HR people. So it can augment HR capability, but like Christine said, we have read in industry that these algorithms are built on historical data set, and if there is a bias in historical data set, it does creep in. So if we are aware of that, if we train our, for example, in talent landscape, our recruiters, in learning landscape, our learning strategists and learning experience designers, then they can be aware of that bias and still apply right human choices on that. And to answer your question on how far we are in Schneider, so in Schneider, we have been privileged to look at AI in HR landscape, and there are three areas. One is inner mobility and career management. That's a moonshot that we're very proud of because we've co-created that space. And then second is, of course, talent acquisition, because in that space, AI has provided tremendous capability to recruiters and freed up their time. And third is learning experience. We are still testing the capability in compensation, workforce modeler, and one more, digital assistant. So that's our landscape.
Awesome. So I'm bringing back to this another point. The perception in the in general public and then the industry perception is AI is nothing but a bots, right? Hey, you know what? We bring more AI. That means you are bringing bots, but not the humans. But I think the other side of the coin, the people predict, hey, you know what? AI really helps to take away those repetitive HR functional tasks so that they can actually spend more time with the employees, the candidates, the prospects. So that brings more human to it. What's your perspective? What's your take on it, Anjali?
I do agree. I do agree, and we have used whether so. First, AI is not necessarily a bot, right? Because it's a bit more of an intelligent version of a bot. So there's a lot that you can do with AI in terms of intelligence, in terms of learning, in terms of its expressiveness, that you don't get in a basic standard RPA, right? So I think the first difference that people need to understand is that RPA, or robotic process automation, is slightly different from machine learning and slightly different from AI. And I guess we're constantly having to educate people on the difference between the three. We tend to deploy a lot of AI in terms of what we call is an augmented workforce, right? And effectively, we say we as HR professionals, because we deliver HR service, will never kill the human in human resources. Right? And if you don't have the human and human resources, it has an extreme societal impact. It also has an extreme culture impact. And we saw some of that coming through in the COVID situation, and I'll kind of talk about it. So what we do is we think of it as an augmented workforce, which is effectively doing what you said, is it comes in, it picks up a lot of the heavy tasks, it picks up some of the really mundane tasks, and it's actually freeing up our talent, especially our junior talent, who would have otherwise in the outsourcing world, like taken years to get past copy and paste of data and, just like sifting through CVs, that's what they used to do, right? You were a fresher, you came out of college, all you did was you copied and pasted data, you picked up phones, you answered basic scripts, right? And how many youngsters want to do that today? Like I have an 8-year-old, if you asked her to do that, she'd look at you and like go, are you just crazy, mommy? But so we are able to kind of use that augmented workforce in order to free up the talent to do work that is actually interesting to them. And in terms of, are we removing the human? I don't think so, because in the COVID situation, we saw that the HR help desks were booming. Like the amount of people we were getting through the door, people that we were getting through the door on all topics, not just talent, because lots of jobs were held to a stoppage point. There were furloughs happening everywhere, so talent was being impacted in a very different way. And we found that everybody wanted to get to the human contact first. So self-service, digital, shift left, all of those fancy terms went straight out the window, and everybody wanted a human voice at the end of the table. And it was a big learning for us as a professional outsourcer, right? What did we need to really focus on when the crisis struck? So that's why for us, I think the answer is it's an augmented workforce. We will never ever drive the human out of HR. Societally, we actually want to be more human in HR, and which is why we're taking away a lot of the tedious, repetitive tasks that seem inhuman to some, right?
Right, that's true. Very true. Yeah, thanks. Christine, and now you complicated more, right? Now I thought it's 70,000. Now we're talking about 200,000. So it's much more 3 times complicated. So how, so how are you and your organization bringing that human element while, as Anjali rightly said, that some of those repetitive tasks are actually inhuman. You don't want the people to perform those, and the current Generation Z, they don't want to do any of those things. I think we lose them in a month if we put them in those jobs, right? I think it's kind of helping AI to extend. We'd love to hear from what's happening in your firm.
Yeah, look, I'm going to totally agree with Anjali on this one, because I absolutely believe that what she described is like the early days of my career. And I certainly believe that AI has a place in a lot of sections of what we do in our day-to-day jobs. I'm not going to talk so much about the once we've got the candidates, to put it bluntly. I'm going to talk about what we're doing about attracting the candidates, because a business is only as good as its people. That's been said 100 times. And we are in the people business, whether you're working in internal HR or whether you're working in the recruitment industry or the staffing industry, sourcing industry. So what we've done, and I'll give you an example. So what we've done, Hays has what we call a find and engage strategy. So this is about how we find people in the first place. And we have actually used a chatbot called Amaya, and we have actually used a chatbot. And what we've found is that, again, referring back to what Angie said, it's taking certain tasks away from our people, which doesn't impact on the human element, because once those people have been found and engaged, then that's when the human element comes in. Because as much, I'm sure in the future this will happen, but people, as you said, still want to speak to a human. We still need to assess the cultural side of things, which maybe isn't so easy to do through AI. And so, we've embraced it. We've said, we're fully on board with this, and where can we use it in our business? And as I said, I just wanted to highlight one area, because a lot of people think you use it once you've got the candidate, how you, but it's actually all about before even that. And through automation and through AI, you can actually get some really good results. And then also it makes the job, as you've just said, makes the job far more interesting for that person in our business who's then engaging with the people. And they become a better quality recruiter, if you want to use that word, or candidate manager, because they're not distracted by cutting and pasting on CVs, and resumes. So that's where we're using it. And I think the relationship aspect is as important, if not more so than ever.
Thank you, Christine. Manisha, I live in the western part of New York, and 1/3 of Western New York population is 800,000. So you are a company, the global firm has 800,000 plus employees. I can't believe it. You're running a 1/3 of Western New York population. So with all the engineers, technicians, and especially these are like tough skills, and tough skills are always in demand. And just going through the number of hires you guys do in a year, and the number of resumes to go through it from college graduates out to career professionals in engineering. How do you bring the human element while continuing to automate a lot of these processes? I'd be very curious to learn.
So talent acquisition and talent acquisition digitization is one of our strategic capability. And as you rightly said, we do receive 1.5 million plus resumes on our career portal. And that's just one source, right? We also have multiple other sources, references that we receive this data set. And our ability to organize this pipeline of data, make it available when we have relevant vacancies, and stay true to both the experience of applicants and also the experience of hiring manager in that process, and be able to get back to everybody. So it's at each stage of candidate experience, the career side, the relationship management, the assessment, every stage we're using AI and technology to help recruiters free up their time and focus more on relationship building or identifying the right talent with right business value.
Awesome, thank you. And again, we're coming, moving around with this, right? So I think we will talk about, right, this is the first the generation of us looking into this kind of a pandemic, this kind of a crisis of this scale globally, right? And there are some countries talk about, hey, you know what, AI should be really helping it out in come out of the crisis in terms of not only just managing people and work from home situations to different things, but even we talk about wellness being indexed from the Mayo Clinic talks about, okay, how productive is your employees are during this pandemic situation, right? People have the isolation and they have mental health illness problems, and the people predict there's $300 billion dollars of productivity loss for the U.S. companies just during this pandemic alone. It's just a staggering if something like this happens, right? So have you seen anything that, or at least in the future, or during your digital transformation process, in engaging AI to deal such situations in the future, if ever happens? I know it's a long question. I'm talking about how AI can help to deal better of such pandemic and crisis situations for the future ones. Anjali, I'll start with you.
So yes, we did learn some very hard lessons, right? So we are a company of 250,000 employees globally, just in operations. So across India, we have about 100,000 employees. When the pandemic struck, we actually had quite low levels of work from home. So we effectively had to move this huge workforce to work from home. And for us, it's really important because obviously we're serving clients. It's not just serving ourselves, but it's also serving clients. So the impact we have of operations stopping is not only for us, but it's for enterprises everywhere. So we moved very quickly to work from home. We've moved successfully 95% of our staff to work from home. What we then found was that, interestingly, the productivity levels of our staff at home went up, probably because they were working really, really long hours. The mental health is a question mark. So there's a lot of work that Capgemini is still doing on assessing the mental health of our own people, but also helping our clients to kind of assess what's happening with other people, and especially to try and bring them back into work. Will we do things differently in another situation like this? Yes, absolutely. Right. So, and I think that goes back to where we found three trends, right? One, in a crisis, people wanted to talk to people, right? And they really wanted to talk. So we had situations where people were calling us, and not because they had a real concern. It was genuinely because they needed to talk to somebody, right? So we had to kind of really change our mindset in order to do that, right? And then it then meant that where you had an augmented workforce, and there was this huge spike in terms of work. Now, we may think that the pandemic meant that the world stopped, and it didn't, right? In fact, the world stopped or is stopping and starting at different points in time. So the rhythm of business is totally broken, and we can't predict it anymore, right? So you're locking, unlocking, locking, unlocking. So the behavior of the market or the behavior of the cycle has changed totally. And what we found is that where we had an augmented workforce, where we had RPA in, where we had the chatbots, so like Christine was referring to the chatbots, where we had the chatbots in, we were able to actually pick up a lot of the work and get the work done, but then also free up enough capacity to allow the teams, so to allow the human teams to spend time in quality interaction, right? And then and ensure somehow that we were not burning out our teams while trying to deal with this workload that was coming in, because it's also our responsibility, especially on the HR help desks, I mean, the IT guys are obviously keeping the lights on. On the HR help desk, we were running pay cycles, right? We had people being furloughed. So you're really calculating different pay cycles very quickly. But more important to actually get the pay out, right? Because people need money. So for us, it was a very interesting observation through the cycle, right? The good news is that we all coped. The good news is the lights were on. I mean, we have a big Calcutta center. And as you know, East India was hit by Cyclone Amphan, which happened as COVID was happening. So they had like a double whammy. They were hit by COVID and then they were hit by Cyclone Amphan. And they still managed to keep everything on, which was phenomenal. And that was because there is a partnership with the augmentation through AI and through RPA. If it was just humans on a lot of laptops, there's only 24 hours in a day, right? And then people still need to sleep. So I think that worked really well. Will we do things differently? Yes, and that's part of the thought process that Capgemini is going through at the moment, also with our clients to say, what would we do different? How does work from home work differently? How does our BCP work differently through the period? So yes, I do think that different trends will emerge, and we can already see them emerging as we speak at the moment.
Thanks, Anjali. Christine, your perspective on how do you position AI for any of the future pandemics and the crisis situations, and how do you manage this?
Yeah, so I mean, I was just going to say, I think a really good point there was made that everyone thought that the world would stop. But I don't know about anybody else, but I think I've been working harder than ever. And it's just been insane, to be honest. And I even ended up writing an article about it for LinkedIn, because what I'm noticing is that people are heading towards burnout in some cases, because a lot of people are used to working and having set hours in their day when they get up and go to the office and come home. And now the day starts when you take off your pajamas, or maybe you don't even take off your pajamas, and it can end when you're about to eat dinner and then you go back to working again. So it's actually created this work culture which is non-stop, and that's not healthy, and you cannot do that long term. And I think, quite rightly said, psychologically it's been pretty hard for people. I think everyone's had those black days when they're going, oh my god, when am I going to get out again?
Right.
And that sort of thing. And I think that another thing is that, by the amount of applications, gosh, you have it, Schneider, the number of people looking for jobs has gone up. Now, it depends what industries you service. I mean, a lot of our industry is professional services. We've seen some people lose their jobs, not as many as you would think, given the unemployment numbers, but certainly applications are going to increase as time goes on, as furloughs finish, as job seeker allowances finish. That's going to increase. And that's where this technology is going to be so important, because it's going to be honest, it's going to help stop people try to go back to justify their job and make themselves even more burnt out. Because I think a lot of people get threatened by automation and AI, because I think it's taking their job. What we're just doing is getting people to understand their job is a bit different now, and we're having to retrain people and that sort of thing. And when something like this happens, people go back to their safe spot, which is, what did I always used to do? And let's forget about the AI piece, because now I need to justify my job again.
Right.
And so it's about making sure we keep on track with that, because we can only build more capability for the future that way. Because if people will revert back, then we're back 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We've got to keep pushing people forward. So I think as leaders, we've got to make sure that we keep people on track. And one of the things we've done, obviously, we've all had to pivot to being remote. Look at this conference now. Wouldn't it have been great to do it in person? But those days have passed by to a certain extent now. And it's one thing that we did, and we took all our training, and in a people business, we have a lot of value in face-to-face. But we've actually managed to create better, stronger relationships, because on video, you've got no distractions. Mm-hmm. You haven't got a fly buzzing around. You haven't got your computer screen flashing up with something. And we've shifted all our training, the entire suite of training. So we have training for every stage of everyone's career in our business. We've shifted it all to online. And some could say we're a bit late doing that, possibly, but that's what we were. So we've used this opportunity to actually improve our business. and take things further rather than go backwards. And we're lucky we're a company that doesn't have any debt. We raised some more equity when we were during the crisis, which put us in a really strong position. So we've been able to actually look at growth projects, and part of that, technology is embedded in that all the way. So
thank you so much.
That's what I think about it. Okay.
Manisha, and as big as the global entity, and you did mention that you're doing a lot of in the talent acquisition space, the digital transformation, the AI. But what are the other areas do you, if you, I mean, we don't want to see this ever happen again in our generations, but if it is, but I think we always wants to be ready for it, right? What would be those internal, thoughts about engaging AI in better way so we were better prepared for this?
So I think one thing that I would like to highlight is this pandemic brought to front the power of humanity and transparency and communication. And before this COVID hit us, we were all on the digital pedal, like thinking digital and data is the end all and be all of everything. So COVID balanced that perspective, because in the early entering phase of surviving the crisis, humans got together to prepare data decisions which were not available. But as we progress, digital is the biggest accelerator, and there's no denying that. So AI will be key to our response to business continuity. So we've learned a lot on how unprepared, or unprepared should not be the right word, but we were caught unaware on our business continuity processes, which were very good in old erstwhile manufacturing, but now in the digital organizations. And one of the key learning is how do we get data and decision grids together, which is cross-sectional, safety, real estate, HR, finance, customers, all at one place. So that's one big learning, and we are actually continuously working on it, even though we are getting out of this. Then second is the augmented workforce. Like if we had to shift overnight to remote, what happened to our customer care centers? How can we keep the light on because Schneider is also a B2B player, and many of our employees are actually providing essential digital services to our customers. So how do we keep the light on there? And then pure growth capabilities. How do we digitize the sales team and more and more marketing teams? So some of those key thoughts and augmenting those with AI.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think I learned a lot. It's like a fire hose of knowledge in half an hour from all of you with the different backgrounds, the size of the organizations. So I may actually go back and write up some of the points and share it with you if you're okay with it. I would love to share and share the knowledge and the pointers to the wider audience. If you're okay with it, with your permission, I'll do that. And I know the Ceipal team only gave me half an hour, and I would love to spend another half an hour with all of you to interview. But I hope I'll get an opportunity to speak to you and do the moderation for another event. But until then, I hope you have a great day. With all the knowledge, we also have one session on the healthy habits during stressful times. Maybe you can pick some couple points there. I think it's 12 at track 1. I'll be there myself. But until then, thank you so much. Have a great day, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very